Okay, folks, we're here today with another Conversations with Chris. A very, very tough subject. It's a friend of mine, Leslie, I've been talking to last year, and she was at the point where she's gone through the healing process as a domestic violence survivor. And she's at the point in her healing process that she wants to talk about this serious issue in our community across the United States so she can give hope to other women, men, or whatever suffering from this and the types of things they need to look for and what they should do just to get out of the violence and live a healthy life. So, Leslie, what I'd like to start with, welcome, and what's important for everybody to understand is this was difficult. I met Leslie last year, and it was difficult for her. And she said there'll be a time when you're ready,
Yep.
and the whole purpose that she told me, which I feel a great honor. She said I want to talk to people so I can help, and that took a lot of courage. And I'm very, very proud of you. I'm very proud to be your friend.
Thank you.
So, what I'd like to do is let's start with this is your story. Talk about growing up, what you learned, and then we'll transition to when you got married and what you suffer from, your healing process, and the things you want to talk about, and the message you want to get across to the community for people that are in the same position that you were in.
It's a hard thing. It really is. Growing up, though, you got married. That's it. If you got pregnant or you were in any kind of relationship, Southern Baptist, you had to be married. You know, not. That's just one thing you didn't do. That was understood.
Right.
So growing up, you never get divorced. It don't matter what it is. It don't matter if you marry an alcoholic. It don't matter. You gonna be married. That's just don't break that. That's pretty much how it was. You know,
No
my
ifs,
family.
ands, or buts.
Yeah,
That's just
there was
the
no
way it was.
separation. You had to grin and bear it. And I mean, honestly, looking back now, my generation, we were groomed to be housewives. We were groomed to be, this is how it is. And if you don't, you get shunned and, that kind of thing, which is wrong. And girls my age were asked to be a certain, you had to carry yourself a certain way. And it's still now, like with my daughter. I worry to death because she's so self-conscious. And that was my thing growing up. I was a very self-conscious person. Got bullied in elementary school. So here I am trying to fit in. And, middle school, high school, body's awkward. Trying to figure out who you are.
Which,
Well,
which, which, in your opinion, is like a normal process.
yeah,
as
I
you
mean,
start
regular
maturing.
teenagers, but with society, the way they look at it, you have to be a perfect size 0, or you have to be this way, or you have to be that way, and that shouldn't be that way. That's one of our major problems to start out with, because you break that person's self-confidence, whether it's male or female, it don't matter.
And now with social media, we
Yeah,
have it
it's
even.
even worse than it was, because we didn't have that. When I was growing up, we had dial-up,
Yeah.
and that's half the time you get dial-up, We didn't have, anything. We had 3 channels on TV.
Okay.
Pretty much that was it. Which I don't mind that. I like simple, living, small town, but that's not going to happen anytime soon for
Right,
me around
right.
here at all. But like even with my daughter now, she's self-conscious. She's got problems with whatever. Too much fat on her thighs, or too much this, or too much that. And that breaks my heart because I see myself. That's how in high school I should have seen the red flags. Person, he knew I was self-conscious. I
And that made
didn't
you-
think I was pretty or good enough. And then you got this person who comes to you and he's like, "You're gorgeous, loves you." He's going to, okay, you think you're in love, but it's really not. He's just a predator trying to.
It makes you vulnerable.
You're very vulnerable at that age. I mean, 16, 17, of course you're vulnerable at that
Right.
age. He says he loves you. I mean, and he was 5 years older than me. So he was 22 when we met, and I didn't know it. And we met
Wow.
at 6, I was 16. And then I moved in with him when I turned 17. I didn't know no better. I thought we was in love. But he knew what he was doing. And it's so hard because you don't think until you're, it's 20 years ago. 22 years ago, actually. You don't think about it until you're way past that. And you're like, well, you start shunning your friends away because you just want to make them happy. And then, he was older, so you got a different set of friends. And before you know it, you're all alone. And you have nobody. You have nobody to contact. Like my family. I went 3 years without even speaking to anybody in my family, really.
Really?
Yeah, because I was going to school, because I did graduate. Pregnant. I was pregnant, but I graduated.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, I had my oldest like 2 weeks after graduation. So, yeah, it was pretty hard. But by then, I had no friends, couldn't talk to nobody. Before him, I'd never done drugs, never smoked a cigarette. I was, went to church, all that, because my grandma raised me pretty much.
And you really couldn't turn to your parents because
I wasn't going to say I'm wrong, of course. I mean, teenager, they're not going to ever say that they're wrong or they made a mistake or it just wasn't going to happen. So I
Right.
was going to deal with it on my own. That's never a way to be.
Okay.
Believe me. It's not. I would have saved so much time had I listened to my parents, honestly. Now it's very hard to think about because, I've lost my dad. My mama, she's not doing the best, so
Right.
you can't make up for them things after
No.
that. So I live with that regret, but that's my own. But with him, it was crazy. It was so fast that it happened and how I got cut off from everybody, everything that I'd known. Like, it was insane. And then being pregnant, I didn't want to have a fatherless child. I mean, who in the South wants to have a fatherless child? No, nobody. That was unheard of. You couldn't do that. So I got married. But as soon as them papers were signed, it was like a switch went off. He never before that had ever put his hands on me. Now, he might talk down to me, might have isolated me, but never until I signed them papers. When I signed that marriage, it was like an ownership he had on me. And at 18, I'm young, I'm stupid. I was stupid. Didn't know no better. I had never been out in the real world. I mean, I had a 9 o'clock curfew. I mean, 9 o'clock I was going home, or my parents were calling the law, and they were going to find me. That's pretty much how it was. That's 22 years ago. Now times are a lot different, and I'm struggling with that with my kids now.
So once you signed the papers,
It's pretty much
and
like he owned me.
basically you became a possession, and he was very possessive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was, every time I turned around, I was cheating on him. And I mean, that's the only person I'd ever been with.
Right.
Ever. And that was just unheard of. When I did that, he was going to be going to be married. We was going to be together forever. But he turned into a whole different person. Like, it wasn't just controlling. It was just simple, stupid things. Like, if I did something wrong and he'd get angry, well, then that anger would turn towards me. But then we had a kid. So it was, I didn't want my son to grow up in that. But then again, I was stuck. I mean, I had no life skills, no kind of job. I had one job I ended up losing because of his possessiveness. He accused me of being my supervisor. I went to work. He had to work on the same shift as me. He wanted us to take our breaks at the same exact time just so I couldn't talk to nobody else. Couldn't have no friends whatsoever. I mean, it's complete isolation. And that's how, if you're self-conscious, like, and that kills me about my daughter. I'm so glad she's strong. But I've seen just her dating deal is, high school is such a thing to go through. It's different now than it was when I was in school. But I'm glad that she has enough about herself. She has picked the right person. Like, it's not, there's no jealousy. She can have friends, he can have friends. It don't matter if it's male, female, whatever. And they don't get jealous. They talk, they have communication, something we didn't have.
So when you look at the emotional, like the possessiveness, the control, and then did that turn to physical abuse at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, how far were you? Are you okay with me asking this? Yeah. How far were you into the marriage when, this possessiveness turned to?
6 months, maybe.
Were you surprised or you knew it?
Yeah, the first time, it shocked me. I could never imagine that he would have done that. I mean, I was completely shocked. And he left, and I had a baby, and I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to the hospital getting staples put in my head because he's bashed my head open and left me there just to whatever. He didn't care.
And you didn't have any money or anything? And you couldn't call anybody?
No, we didn't have cell phones back then. I mean, there wasn't no cell phone. Not there. I mean, and plus I had been so isolated, and it was just hard. I mean, I was supposed to be married. I don't want to admit that anything was wrong. So of course, put the makeup on, did the whole thing. Like nothing happened. He was so sorry. He didn't mean to. He'd been drinking. Every excuse you could think of in the book.
Didn't the hospital question?
No, no.
Did you tell them what happened, or did you?
I never got any rest. Never got a chance because I was never alone with a doctor. Or now, if you go, they're supposed to take the victim or what they would perceive could be a victim and talk to them alone.
Right.
Away from anybody else, away from letting anybody know. Back then they didn't. I had his stepmom in the room with me the whole entire time. So, of course, I wasn't going to be able to say anything because the fear of him getting in trouble, and she didn't want that to happen, of course. So they were just like, well, she just fell down the steps. That was the whole deal. I just fell down the steps, busted my head.
So when he left that first time and you went to the hospital, how long were you by yourself? Did he come home the next day, or was he gone for a while?
That night. That night, because we was at his father's house.
And then it was.
And I mean, his parents, they were like, they couldn't believe he'd done that. They were just, especially his mother, God rest her soul, she's dead now. But she gave him what for. She just could not believe that he would ever, because he grew up in abuse. And I guess that's one of them things where it's systematic. You learn what you see, what
Right.
you know. You have to break that, which is what I've been trying to do with my kids. My son, he would never hit a woman. That's something I've taught both my boys. Don't matter if that woman slaps you or what, you walk away. Do not ever put your hands on somebody you're supposed to love. It's just not what you do. It's taken me this long to find that out, and a lot of therapy and a lot of everything. But if you love somebody, you're not going to put your hands on them, period.
So when he came back, was it different? Was it better for a period of time, or did
Not
it
long.
now?
Not long.
So did the violence escalate at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much just from then until I left him. It was violence all the time.
How long were you there?
We were together after that point. See, my son, he was about 6 months by then. He was 2 when I finally got away from him.
How were you able to get away?
Well, after it happened and every time over and over again, and I mean, I was a teenager and I wanted to do my thing, and teenagers, they drink, and so I wasn't the best person up to that point. But then I come to a point where I was like, I got a son, I need to grow up. I'm gonna stop this. So I put my foot down, and there was rules at our house, and I'm like, there's no more drinking, there's no more this, there's no more that. Well, yeah, that didn't work. I mean, there was a lot of dark days at that house. Like, we're talking, I mean, you got somebody holding a knife to your throat telling you, look, nobody will ever find you, nobody cares about you, and at this point, you haven't really had contact with, your family. You hadn't been able to be around them, and one of the only people, my brother, who would stay with me sometimes, he was like, you gotta get out of it. I mean, he had a charge pinned against him because he was defending me, trying to get me out of the situation. And it turned violent. And yes, he put a hole in the wall. My brother did, trying to get me because my ex had caused a wreck. I mean, he checked the wheel when we were going down the road with my son in the car and made me go off into the ditch and totaled my car.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when you have abuse that bad. I mean, and you call the law and you try to get away, but one of the time I called the law, they brought him back to the house.
So
He only spent a night in jail after me calling and pressing criminal domestic violence. And this is when I was trying to leave. I hadn't had it. I was at the end of dealing with him. I got tired of there was so much that happened during our time together. I mean, he sold me to a drug dealer. He had raped me. I mean, yeah, you tell a cop that, and they're looking at you like, you're his wife. How does he rape you? Well, I told him, no, I didn't. We're having problems. He's beating me. I don't want to be nothing to do with that. And he still forcefully makes me do it. It got to the point to where he was locking me in my room. Only time I got to come out was to go to work. So I would walk to work.
Well, who would watch the children?
He would have my son. That's the thing that he would hold over me.
Yeah.
As he knew I was going to come back as long as he was there. Because, I almost died having him. Like, that's how bad it was. I had an emergency C-section. They cut me from hip to hip. I was an afterthought. My son got released from the hospital before they were going to release me because I was in so much shock. I sat there and shook for 7 days in the hospital because I lost so much blood and all this. And so I come home, and I'm still in a terrible situation. And nobody on the outside sees what happens on the inside. You're scared because what are you going to do? What is a teenager going to do?
And
There
you're
was not
trying to
safe
protect your
harbor.
child.
There was no kind of anything.
There was nothing.
No. When I finally got the courage, after the cops brought him back for the first criminal domestic violence, and told me I needed to learn how to be a good little wife, that he loved me. The cops did, yes, they
The
did.
sheriff's office said that.
Luckily, that cop is no longer there. It's been changed because we got Crenshaw now. Back then, we had Singleton. He was the one, he was the sheriff, and, so that was a whole crapshoot there. But, yeah, they brought him back to the house and told me that I needed to learn how to be a good little wife, that he loved me.
So, and you couldn't talk to your parents about it, right?
Well, they knew, and they had been a kind of a struggle there. But, we was married. It was just a hard situation. And I moved out, and when I moved out, I didn't move out on good terms. That's a regret I have, and I can never fix that. That's just something that happened. And
So
we try
how
to
did
move
you
on
get
from that.
away? Did you just one day just
Well,
forget
what
it?
happened, because I remember it like it was yesterday. I got out of my room, I was going to work, getting ready to go to work. Well, my son, he was only 2, very independent. And he went and asked his dad if he could have some milk in his sippy cup. Well, that day, he looked at him and he told me, he said, "You're not my problem." And that was just like, I'm done. That's it. I'm over. I'm going
He
to get
said
out
that
of here.
to his son?
Yeah. He just wanted to pick up. Because I was busy getting ready for work. Because at that time, I had so long to get down to work and so long to get home. If I wasn't home at a certain time, he'd lock me out in my house. It didn't matter if it was wintertime. It didn't matter what it was.
And you
So,
couldn't even get to your son.
yeah. So I would make sure I was home on time. And then when I get home, he would take all my money. So it didn't matter how hard I worked. He was still taking my money. They wouldn't know I can get away. But when he said that, that was just something that just went off, and I'm like, yeah, my son's nobody's problem. My son isn't a problem. I'm just giving my life for my son. So this has got to stop. So, I started planning how I'm going to get out of here. And that's hard because I didn't have much time alone. There wasn't no alone time. So I got in touch with my dad. And I told him, I'm leaving him. I'm leaving. I'm on walk. So I just put most of my son's stuff in the suitcase, put him in his stroller because I couldn't use my car. He thought I was going to leave, so he made it to where I couldn't crank my car and leave. He took stuff out of the car. I don't even know what he did to the car, which at that point I didn't even care. He could keep the car. I left everything. He could have everything. Only thing I took was what my son needed and me a couple changes of clothes, and I walked.
And you just grabbed your suitcase and you left and walked.
Yep.
Where did you go? Had
My
you-
grandmother's.
Okay, so she knew you were coming, right?
Well, my daddy knew. He knew that there had been problems, and I was a daddy's girl. And,
Okay.
and there was one person I could talk to was my daddy. Me and my mom, our relationship wasn't so much. My brother and her more closer than me and my dad. That's just how it was, So he knew, and he knew what was happening. And at the time, my grandmother had, kind of got sick, so he come back home from Florida, and he helped me with my son. He watched him for me while I would go to work, try to get my life back straightened out. But I wasn't away from him. I hadn't got away from him because after that,
Did
He
he
figured-
still work at the same place as you?
no, this
Okay.
time I didn't got a different job.
Okay.
I had to because I got fired from that job because he wouldn't let me go to work. He kept me from going to work, so I lost that job.
Right.
And, we moved close enough to my family that I knew I could get away from him, and he wasn't going to come to where I was at. He wasn't going to come deal with my brother. He wasn't going to come deal with my dad. I just knew he wasn't because I told him I did everything. And I was like, well, you're not going to have to worry about that again. Well, what we didn't count on is that he would be bold enough to come to my job and beat me.
He beat you at work?
My boss back then called the law on him because he made me swallow my wedding ring in the parking lot in front of our business after beating me. And we sat there and waited on the cops to come for 45 minutes. Her calling 911 telling them that one of her employees was getting beaten. And she knew the story because I told her what was going on. I let her know in advance, look, I'm leaving him. You know, I might need a couple of days because at that point I was working lots of hours, trying to save up money, trying to get ahead. Because it wasn't long after that I took on 2 jobs. See, I was working 2 jobs and had my son.
So she was really a supportive.
Oh, I love that woman to death. I wish she never had to go
She's
out
still
of business.
around.
Well, no. Well, she's in Miami
Okay.
now because she went through the same thing. See, that's where I was able to talk to her because she moved to this country as arranged marriage. She had nobody to talk to. Her first husband was abusive. So she knew. She could tell. She knew the red flags, you know, because she lived it too. So she was a lot of help to me getting away from him. And she told the cops wasn't even going to take pictures of where he had my bruises and my marks, nothing. She
So did
told
they
him
arrest?
she made him.
Good.
Well, it was after that, in the sheriff's department, by then, they had a victim's advocate that actually did go to court with me. That's about the length of what they did. She got me an order of protection. They arrested him, and yeah, he did go for that criminal domestic violence. This was before criminal domestic violence become a felony. This was back when they were misdemeanors. So, you know, the first criminal domestic violence, it wasn't long, he was out of jail. The second one, that fell into where it went into the felony mode. He has since had several others, but it's in other states. States don't connect. Georgia and South Carolina do not like each other when it comes to legal anything. Because, you know, recently I had his ex call me. She's like, he's been beating me. I'm scared. I said, look, I tried to tell you when you got involved what you was getting involved in, what we're living with. I mean, because even though I left him back then, we're still connected. We have a son. State of South Carolina, because we were married, he has parental rights. But I was lucky enough with the victim's advocate that she had it where she could tell he had problems and he was needing to go to anger management. So they court ordered his visitation to be supervised with a mediator that we had to pick, which was his sister. And his sister was one of the only people who actually, to this day, she still supports me. She doesn't agree with nothing that happened back then. So she wouldn't even let him see him if he was drinking. Nothing. She would come pick him up every other weekend. I was court ordered to do that. I was told that if I did not make him available every other weekend, they would hold me in contempt, no matter what the situation was. He wouldn't show up half the time. Or he would call 5 minutes before he was supposed to be there. Or something. There would always be something. But it just kept him in my life.
What was the time frame or the years that this was happening?
My son was born in 2002. So 2005, I think it was 2004, 2005, I finally got my legal separation from him. So that was a whole nother ballgame. And I'm still dealing with it because I haven't had the money to get a lawyer. He didn't show up to court. My legal aid could only do so many court cases. He didn't show up. I couldn't get my divorce. I did get my separation finalized. So I don't have to pay no more of his debts. I don't have to do none of that. And I was to get child support. But in the child support system, it's faulty. He has me $22,000 in back child support right now. My son's grown.
So at this point, you're separated.
Yes.
You're not divorced.
Yep.
Can he still see your child?
And my son's grown. He's 22 now with his
okay.
own baby. So, I mean, he makes his own decisions. My son started making his own decisions at 16.
Right.
Whether he wanted to see him or he didn't.
So he doesn't have any relationship with him.
No.
correct?
And he keeps on saying, oh, it's because of me. I caused it. I'm like, talk to your son. Your son wants to hurt you
Right.
because he knows. He remembers these things that happen. He can, and as much as I try to keep him from seeing what, he still knows what
He
happened.
knows. So at this point, do you have any type of restraining order? Does he stay
No,
away?
the order of protection only lasts for so long. Then after that, you have to prove harassment. You have to prove where they've fallen. You have to prove these things. Well, you got to understand, it's been that long ago, and I still deal with it. I've been suicidal. I've been through, post-traumatic stress is not a joke.
Right.
You're anxious. Like this now, only reason why I'm able to do this because I'm just hoping one person who is 17 who finds that person that says that they love them, they can see through that and they can understand that they're, maybe slow down, think about this, listen to your parents, something, because there is red flags, but you don't see them until you're so far gone.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
Chris, if you'll let me ask a question. You're talking about your son. What was the effect of your son as a kid? How did he come through all of the things that he saw? Because it really does affect a kid.
It does.
From myself that grew up in that kind of situation with a very violent father, it does affect a kid. How did he overcome that? Did he have to have counseling, or he was just
he
able?
did do counseling in elementary school. But he was so young. I was 3. He was 3 when I got out. And it was just how it all happened. I met Kendall. So he stepped in as a father figure. We had a relationship. And at first I didn't, he never seen Patrick for forever. And then all of a sudden, it's just, he wanted to meet him. So I was like, okay, well, we're committed because when you meet my son, that's it. I don't just let people, some of these girls now, they don't care. They have 2 or 3 fathers to these kids,
Right.
And I'm just was like, no, that was one big thing. But him being involved, he stepped in as a father figure. He was there. He had lived abuse. He knew, so it was kind of like
And that
taught him.
relationship,
Yeah, because it wasn't never forced on him to, this is your dad, you're going to call him. He was going to counseling. He felt comfortable in calling him that because because we went to his counselor because he was like, I don't know what to say to him. He just started calling me dad. I'm like, well, I'm fixing to have kids. And, his brother and sister, it kind of, his counselor explained to us, he's got a family dynamic. He feels safe. So in this, he feels safe. So you don't make him say anything. Well, it wasn't on us. He started calling his biological father by his first name on his own. It didn't have nothing to do with anything I showed him or told him. And that's what Max wants to say is that, oh, well, you brainwashed him against me. No, he's seen that you didn't come pick him up. There was several weekends that he would cry with his bag waiting on y'all to come get him, and you would call and say, oh, well, I can't come get him this weekend. So I'm having to scramble and find a babysitter just because you are playing this game where you still have control over me. That's all it is. And it's still today, it's still control.
So-
Even now, 20 years later, he still tries to get control over me.
Okay, so with your son is an adult. And then today, you're separated. So,
God.
so can you, this is the thing that something I have a hard time trying to understand legally. So he can still harass you and hassle you, and
Yeah. I can go through the whole order again and get another order of protection.
so are you finally at peace now where you have your own life,
Yeah.
undisturbed,
Well,
and
as much as it could be, but here recently, he's kind of stepped in and tried to disturb it, but he don't have no more control over me. That part of my life is, closed. I teach my kids, to look for the things that I should have looked for. Just like with my son. He's got his own relationship. He's got his own kid. He cannot stand somebody to put their, if he was to see it out just in public, he would probably come unhinged.
right.
If he ever seen a man put his hands on a woman, or, because he's even a woman, but he said with a man, that man can overpower the woman and walk away.
Right.
Most cases. I'm not saying all cases because I've seen some where no, that poor guy needed some help. Because, it goes both ways. It's not male or female. If you love somebody, you should never put your hands on them. You should never try to degrade them. You should never, none of that. It don't matter. If you feel that way, you should walk away. It should be just end it, be done.
Right.
You know, separate before you hate each other so bad.
And you know, the thing, the violence is,
Oh, it's
I mean,
terrible.
it's horrible.
It's
But when
terrible.
you talked about the PTSD, you made
It's
a really
hard.
good point.
It's hard.
Yes, and to this day, that you have that
Mm-hmm.
impact. But you've gotten counseling, you've got,
Oh, yeah,
and now
lots
you've
of
got a
counseling.
support group that people that love you, that
Mm-hmm.
is helping you. I mean, because you're really still on a journey to
It's a struggle every day.
Right.
There's will be no end to it. I mean, there's never gonna be an end to it, and I know that. But I learned to cope and live
right.
with it. The mental health situation in our county is not the best.
When did you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, was there a day that just one day you're like, you know what? I think I'm finally over the worst, or did you just gradually, or
No, it was pretty much. I mean, it was bad. I mean, you gotta understand. I mean, I slept with a loaded gun under my pillow because I was scared he was gonna come up and take my son. He was threatened that I was scared that he was gonna come get me. And Lord only knows what he would do with me. Because order of protection ultimately is a piece of paper.
right?
I mean, you have to get the law out there. Well, it's going to take 45 minutes to get law enforcement. And I'd already seen that proven to me the last time. And it was, working and just doing them every day. And then I met Kendall, and we started a life together. And he was kind of like a protector to me because he knew what abuse was. He had seen it in his own situation. And it was, he basically made me feel safe where I didn't have to do that anymore. I knew that he wasn't going to get me. I mean, I wasn't going to get my son.
How long have you been with Kendall?
We've been together, 18 years now?
Okay, good.
Something like that. It's been a long time. And
So-
it wasn't always easy. I mean, and I can tell you, it wasn't easy on him because I didn't trust nobody.
Right.
Your trust is broken completely.
You shouldn't trust anybody.
And
I
so
mean, how
then
could
at
you?
that point, you're hypervigilant. Everything's a lie. I mean, and you're comparing the person you are now to who you was. I mean, in my situation, that's only 2 serious relationships I've ever had in my life. And it's hard. It's a strain on a relationship, though. Plenty of times I know he's just, I'm walking away. We're not going, because, I mean, you deal with suicide. You deal with not wanting to live anymore. If it wasn't for the kids, I probably would be dead.
Right.
I mean, because they're the thing I live for. I mean, that's the one thing that I found through therapy, that if I was to do something to myself to harm myself, which I struggle with every day, it's not a lie. I struggle. Suicide, you can be suicidal and not act on it, but
No.
still have them thoughts every day.
It's just torture.
I'm a horrible person. This is all my fault. You go through them thoughts, but you have to learn to cope. You have to deal with it.
The thing is that bothers me the most
Mm-hmm.
is, when, we see the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then people will be like, well, that's a private thing between husband and wife. I'm like, that is the
Yeah.
stupidest
I heard
thing.
that a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, you're supposed to take care of
I
your
mean,
home. You're not supposed to.
And then you're,
how you gonna work it out?
You have nothing. It's like, are you not even human that you can't understand that, so the thing about it is that people see, and now they're seeing as the thing is that I was very surprised and very pleased about it is you reached out to me before August last year and we talked.
Well, because that's a big thing to me is with me dealing with it and me seeing it in this area. Mental health and criminal domestic violence are 2 big things to me that needs to be changed. I mean, there needs to be a whole overhaul of our system.
Right.
Because nothing's easy. Nobody comes to help you. I mean, if it hadn't been for my family, I would be right back where I was.
Exactly.
I mean, because there wasn't no safe harbor. There wasn't nobody coming to rescue me. Homeless shelter, forget that. I mean, it wasn't going to help. I mean,
And it's not a matter of people saying, well, all you got to do is leave.
it's harder than you think.
Ex-
I mean, because.
Exactly.
I mean,
It's like you're a prisoner, right?
I mean, pretty much. And you're broken to the point to where you believe what you're told.
Right.
And when you're hearing every day, nobody's going to come find you. Nobody cares that you're dead. Nobody, you're here with your mind. You start to believe that. I mean, so much like they say Stockholm Syndrome. You start to survive. You go into survival mode. The only way I'm going to be able to survive this is I'm just going to do what he says.
Right.
He wants supper at this time. It needs to be on the table this time. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. House needs to be this way. That's the only way you can survive. And it's not that easy to leave. The only thing I can say is I just snapped when he said that about my son. That was it. That was the only reason why I was living, because I'd already tried to commit suicide at that point. I'd already tried to end it. The only reason why it wasn't ended was because of my son.
Right.
And it's hard. I mean, you're 18, 19 years old. Where are you going to go? I mean,
Well,
20, 21.
I mean, you're a woman,
You're still
but you're
young.
still a child. You're young. You're still a child.
And if you've been like me, I was, when I doubt, I had been sheltered so much. I didn't even know what was in this county. I didn't even know that there was an upside Seneca. I thought downtown Seneca was it. That was all Seneca. There was nothing else. We went to the grocery store in Seneca. We didn't ever travel up any further, and we only went once a month. I mean, I think because it was nothing back then. I mean, now, hey, you got a Dollar General on every corner. We didn't have that back then.
Right.
I mean, we had like one store in the area.
So Leslie, when you look at this, and you have, I always got to say, okay, and then you got men, but really, it's just because I've seen it in my family too. So
Well,
when
men and women, it isn't either way it goes. I mean, men don't get no help. I mean, they'd be laughed at if they say a woman's abused them, but it happens.
So when as you look at say a woman right now that hasn't made it as far as you and is in the position, they got the child and they're hopeless and everything else, what type of message, what would you send, like an example, if they came to you and said, Leslie, what do I do? I mean, what would you say?
It's hard. It's not going to be easy. I mean, you can either sit there and continue, and it's not going to get no better. You're going to end up in a barrel somewhere. You're going to end up in a grave. And if you don't have anybody to talk to, nobody that you've reached out to, nobody you've confided in, nobody's going to be looking for you. And that's what they're going to put in your head. But if you really want out, you can get out. It's not easy. It's not everybody's going to be able to. I mean, it was hard. I mean, it's still hard. I mean, I'm trying to get over and this has happened 22 years ago.
Right.
I mean, just the way it all started and the way the way I was broken. And, I mean, because at 16, I thought he loved me. No,
So when
that
you
was
look-
not love.
When you look, exactly, and when you look in a situation like this with this abuse, you just said something very important that people really need to hear. 22 years,
Yeah.
and you still have the after effects. I mean, you're getting better every day.
Oh, yeah.
But for 22 years, you still have
Yeah.
the nightmare, and I mean, it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
so. When people say, I mean, it's always easy for somebody, like when they say, well, I don't know why they just don't leave. Yeah, that's easy for you to say because you're not
You're not in that
experiencing
position. You haven't been beaten. You haven't been broken.
Exactly.
And it's
you get,
systematically done over time.
and that's where you need to understand and
Yeah,
have
it's not
that
easy.
empathy, and you need to see, people will see somebody that's like, well, they look pretty good to me. Well,
Yeah, on the outside, of course, you won't want everybody
Exactly,
to believe it because
because
you don't
they're-
want to go home and be beaten because there's
Exactly.
a hint that somebody knows, or you have to go home with that person.
Right.
So you're going to act the part. You're going to do whatever you're told to do. You're going to keep your mouth shut. You're not going to make eye contact. You're not going to have an opinion. Whatever they say is yes, that's what it is. And it's hard. I mean, there was people on the way, like I told you, I got sold to a drug dealer. Well, that drug dealer told me, he says, honey, you need to get away. He says, I can tell you're not like the normal type of person I deal with, that I'm going to be out here, pimping out or whatever. He's like, I know you're not. You need to get away. You're worth more than that. Well, yeah, but how am I going to get away? We don't have a system set up with mental health. We don't have a system, when these people go in the hospital, okay, if a doctor, nurse, anybody could tell that there's something off. They should have the room cleared, have somebody come in, like a counselor or something, come in and talk to the person. Say, listen, you're safe. Do you need help? But then after that, we got to have something set in place,
Exactly.
and we don't. It's so sad. I mean, okay, if this was abuse was happening to me again, I'm in the emergency room. What's going to happen after that? Who's going to contact me? Okay, the victim's advocate. She went to court for me one time. That's it. She got my order of protection. I never heard from her again. Still to this day, I haven't heard from her.
Right. And you know what? Only reason I want to stop you for a second is I want people to hear what you just said. What you just said is that, okay, you have things like, you know, you go to the hospital, they're supposed to talk to you, and all that. But when you look at it and you have somebody that's actually gone through that and can see it still happening,
Yeah.
it's really not.
It's a
You don't
hopeless
really
situation
have
to
the
most people who's trying to
resources.
get out of it.
Exactly.
And I mean, I don't understand. You know, safe harbor is no longer right. They're out. So yeah, for a short period of time, they might have helped some people, but now if a young person who's 18, 19 is in the same situation, what hope do they have? I mean, they go to the hospital. Okay, the cop takes a statement, whatever. They get arrested. You go home. Well, what if you relied on that person financially? What if they were the breadwinner because they wouldn't let you go to work? You know, you had no option. You're there. So now you're lost. You have no skills, no way to support yourself, no, nothing. I mean, and they say that the cop's supposed to call you and let you know when that person gets released. I never got a phone call.
Right.
Nobody ever told me that he was getting released. Nothing. I mean, I had a cop bring him back. And I'm like, why are you bringing him back here? Like, I just had him arrested. And they're like, well, because this is his address and you just need to be a nice little wife. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I was like, this is not going to end well. And it didn't. It didn't
Right,
end well.
right,
I mean,
right.
I got the crap beat out of me for that.
Yeah, yeah. And then, like I said, and I read some of these. You know, we had a guy that was arrested and indicted, and I mean, I was reading these comments, and it was women writing them. I mean, and
Well,
it's
I
like
noticed,
it's
too,
like
on the
well,
other
that's between,
side,
that should be private.
you got to think on the other side of that, though. If that person who's the abuser, what if that's all they know?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's what they seen growing up? What if that was what was instilled in them? You're the man. You're supposed to take control. Your wife's not supposed to act like that. You know. So you got to look at it that, and then somebody's sympathetic that way. But at what point do we break the circle?
Exactly.
I mean, at
And-
what point do we change things?
And rather than looking at saying, well, you know, it's private, they should be saying,
shouldn't be private.
you know what, we need to make sure people are safe.
Yeah.
You know what, you can argue with somebody, but when it gets to the point where somebody's being hurt and psychologically being hurt, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, where does it, you have to be able to shout that from the rooftop, say, hey, man, this is not acceptable.
Well, I mean, in any relationship, you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have your arguments, disagreements, whatever. I mean, you're going through life, you're trying to figure it out. But it should never become physical. It shouldn't ever be where you're degrading somebody else. I mean, it's just not
Absolutely.
how it's supposed to be. I mean, you can disagree. I can disagree with every, but we can agree to disagree at that point.
I've been married 45 years.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm sure there's been ups and downs in your relationship. Y'all have
Oh, yeah.
arguments, and you know, but you've never
No.
physically hurt them. You've
No.
never publicly degraded her. You've never
It's the best,
done anything like that. Well, some of
No.
these people who get
the best
abused,
ally I ever had. But, you know, we argue. I mean, we
I mean,
both
of
have
course,
strong
everybody's got
personality.
opinions.
Yeah.
you know, and that's something as in an adult relationship you
But we
learn
talk-
through.
but we talk it
Yeah,
out.
communication is a big thing.
And we didn't have to go through what you
Yeah,
did.
it's
and
hard.
and I'm very,
It's-
very sorry. But you know what? The thing about it is, just last year, me
Mm-hmm.
meeting you in August, and now where you are now, I see, you know, I mean, when you talk, you would make eye contact, we would talk, and I was listening. But now I see even a bigger difference.
Yeah.
I see,
I mean,
you know,
I work on it. I mean, I have journals. I write about my past. And a lot of it, too, with my kids. They help me more than anything.
and you should give and a lot of times people will say, that's really good. But you know what you need to do sometimes is when you're looking in the mirror, you need to be proud of yourself.
Well,
What you've been able to.
That's a lot. I mean, that's
I
part of
know.
mental health. When you're going through the whole looking at yourself and being confident and, because, I mean, when you're abused, you're broken completely. I
Right.
thought I was just, nobody was ever going to love me. I was never, because, I mean.
And you're
it's-
learning differently.
Yeah. And you have to get that self-confidence. You have to get the self-image back. That's one thing that, when I was in active therapy with my therapist, that's one thing we worked on, is I have to have my own self-confidence. I have to look at myself in the mirror and be able to see, a beautiful, strong person. And in the beginning, it wasn't that easy. I mean, I didn't look in the mirror for a long time. I mean,
Right.
I still have scars. I have permanent scars that I'll always have, and I see them. Maybe nobody else can, but I can see, the 5 staples in my head. I can see, just different things that was done to me.
Right.
But nobody else can see that. But you're so broken, and it's like you have to work on yourself. And in this world, it's hard.
So
And it just gets harder.
it is. And I look at this and the message that is coming across to the community is, okay, you're seeing the impact of what happened. I'm better, but you're seeing this is serious.
It is very
It
serious.
it can kill people, and the impact that you can see to a human is something that you may not see if I'm in the store and everything's fine, but it's not. So when you see the domestic abuse and you see it happening, and you hear it's happening, then you need to be out there trying to help somebody
Yeah,
and
but
say, "Hey, listen, are you
it's
really okay?"
hard.
Pri- yeah,
To get
privately.
through to because people, they'll look at you and they'll be like, well, that's just not happening. I'm like, look, I see it, I lived it. I can tell by body language, there's something more going on there. Maybe, they need to talk to somebody, maybe, but there's no help out here, none
Right.
whatsoever.
I did check, and I wanted to confirm that Safe Harbor is actually back open.
Oh, they are. Well,
Yeah,
that's that's
they
good.
just opened back up for operation
Right.
about 2 months ago. There is another question I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever reach out to the church community for help?
No. I mean, there just wasn't, you didn't, I had
Yeah.
already had a son and not been married, so it was,
Yeah, there.
church was kind of, there was a lot I went through. I mean, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, yeah, I did drugs, I'm not gonna lie. That was part of it, but that was how I dealt.
Is that how you had to cope with it?
Yeah,
Is-
because it's almost like you can numb yourself and
not feel the pain.
anything.
The pain.
And yeah, the physical pain was bad, but the emotional pain was a lot worse. I would have rather to be beaten than have my
Well, that-
emotional self broken, because
that-
that's far harder to replace than, having a gash on your head.
They do say that the physical heals quicker than the emotional, because the emotional,
It stays with you a lot
it stays
longer.
with you a lot longer. And again, if you don't deal with this, it can affect your life. If someone is a kid and a teenager that grew up in domestic violence, it took me until I was at least about 23 or 24 years of age to realize that that wasn't my fault, because I carried the guilt for a long
Yeah.
time that it was all my fault. I was the responsible. I was the reason. And when it came right down to it, I wasn't the problem.
That was one of the things I struggled with my son, was because I didn't want him to ever feel like any of it was him, because it wasn't him.
No.
He was put in a situation and he shouldn't have been. But that's the one thing that I got out of the whole situation that I'm so proud of. He is such a fine young man. And he agrees. We have to change that circle, because if he continued on what he's seen when he was little, he should be beating his wife. He should, because that's the way he
The,
is.
the generational
Yeah.
cycle.
But I had to step in and say, we're breaking that. We're not doing this no more. This, that was way back, when. We're in 2024. We're in, this is the future. Even now, with my kids, I don't physically, I can only think of maybe once or twice that I've had to whip my children and all, and that pretty much fixed me out of high school. I'm working on grandkids now. But, that's just something that I did not want in my house. Is I did not want that physical. I don't want my kids to fear me. I want them to respect me as their parent. But I want communication. And that's what we've worked on. It's
Exactly.
communication.
They can
I
always
mean,
come to you.
yeah,
and
we're
your
open.
love,
I've never
support.
kept nothing from my children. Even, my bad decisions that I made, they know about them.
Mm-hmm.
They know that I've had issues. They know I've been in jail. They know about all of it, because the way I feel about it, if I keep that from them, that's like basically lying to them. So how can I say, y'all can come to me with anything if I can't even go to them with all my problems? I mean,
That's really good. I never thought about
I
that.
mean, if you think about it, I mean, if your kid doesn't, and they come to me about everything. I can, if they get in trouble at school, I go, look, I'm telling y'all right now, he's telling the truth, because that's one thing in our family that we don't lie. Because when I cannot trust you, that's it. I mean, I can't trust you. I'll never be able to trust you again. So we've taught them from early on. It don't matter how bad it is, as long as you don't lie to me, we can work through it.
Right.
So I can tell administration, look, he's telling on himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not going to lie. He's telling you the 100% truth, and it don't matter if he's getting himself in trouble, but you can guarantee that is the truth.
That's
Because, and I mean, they have been incidences where I get called from school, and school's like, well, he was the first one to tell the truth. He told me everything, including why he had a part in it. And I'm like, well, that's what I want. I don't want my kids to ever feel like they got to lie to me.
Right.
Because we shouldn't live in a world where we have to do that. But we do.
But that's quite an accomplishment with you being able to,
It's hard.
to teach that.
It's
and-
hard, and it's where my generation is going to have to break that.
Right.
And it's hard to do because the way I was raised, I mean, I got beat with a king hickory. I had, and that's a thorn bush, and it's not one hickory, it's like 4 at a time. And you get I only got one weapon like that, never again. But luckily, my parents, they come from another generation where it was accepted for them to be hit, or you didn't make any noise. The kid is not supposed to be heard, that type of thing. And, at some point, my parents were like, well, we're going to change this too,
Right.
And that's the same thing still. I mean, my dad's gone, but my mom, I'm like, Mom, we do this in our house. We try to talk to him. She's not a good talker. Sometimes she likes to yell a lot. I don't think she realizes she yells as much as she does. But she'd been through a whole lot in her life.
Right.
I mean, it's just, in her story. I mean, her life wasn't easy growing up. My grandparents,
Well, she's learning from you.
But yeah, and see, that's the thing. And if I can change just a few lives, I'll be happy. But
I learn from my kids.
It's
I
hard.
change opinions based on.
it's really
things-
hard. And
yeah.
I mean, you got decisions, you got consequences you live with. So that's another thing that we're dealing with. Like, you got to make your own life. I can't tell you how your life's going to go. If you want to move out at 17, let me tell you what I went through.
Mhm.
This is how hard it is. This is how much you struggle. You're going to be working 2 jobs. You're going to be, barely making it. And with the economy now, you're barely making it even more. So you might need a 3rd job. You're going to be working all the time because you got to have an education. Luckily, I had an education. I graduated. So at least that helps me in the job world. But, you have to learn your own mistakes. It's hard. It's
Well-
not an easy lesson. My kids are slowly learning it,
Right.
but they're doing very well with it.
You've given us. You've given us a very good perspective.
It's
Of
hard.
a lot of things, and I think talking to the community and making some recommendations. I mean, I think that's a very, very powerful message, and the part about the PTSD, it's just
It's ongoing. I'll have it for the rest of my life. I
Right.
mean, I cope with it. My anxiety's gotten better. So, I used to, I couldn't talk to a person.
Exactly.
I couldn't go out. I would overanalyze and I still do. Like, coming here, I was like, okay, what all questions could be asked? How am I going to answer this? I mean, you go over this thing in your head, and it can be so,
but you can.
tiring. It can be physically, like, your
Right.
shoulders start hurting, like
Right.
you're always on edge. But the anxiety part, I mean, yeah, they can give you pills. They can pill you, believe me. Been there, done that. Done went to the mental thing. A lot of medication. I had to make a decision. I'm coming off my medication. I'm not going to rely on this medicine for the rest of my life. Because then you walk through life as a zombie, then you're a pharmaceutical, and if you already been on drugs, that don't help nothing in the long run. Thankfully, I did have a good doctor who could say, look, this medicine is just for breakthrough issues only. You got to work through these problems. You got to take them one at a time. And you don't need that medication to be like, because, I mean, yeah, I could be taking a Xanax for every day for the rest of my life just to deal with talking to people.
Right.
Like, I have a hard time, like, even at the restaurant. I mean, if that dining room gets crowded, I can't go out there.
Right.
I feel like everybody's looking at me. It's hard. They're judging me. They're saying this and that. Like, that's always at the back of your mind. But you have to try to work past, and it's hard. I mean, my daughter, she has anxiety. don't know where it come from, but she does. She can perform, doing what she does in front of a bunch of people. But when it's more of an intimate type situation where people can really look at her, she'll completely break down and just have,
Right.
and panic. And it's just, you have to breathe through it and you have to just try
And so
to
you're
work
helping
through
her
it.
with that.
I mean, your comfort zone. And I mean, now I have people around me that support me. I have coworkers. I have, I say my coworkers, but they're my best friends in the world. I mean, even out of work, like, we're going to go and do something tonight. They're there for me no matter what. I can call them up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. If something's bothering me, I have a nightmare. I can talk to them because they go through some of the same things I do. You have to find them people, and they're my family. I mean, you got blood family, but they are my family. I spend holidays with these people. I spend a lot of hours with these people, and they've been very good to me. And I try to help them just as much as they help me. But you've got to find that community, and there's not many people like that in this world anymore. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm
Right.
very blessed in the situation I'm in right now.
So, I want to thank you
Mm-hmm.
for coming today and, talking to us. And I want to make sure everybody understands that, this took a lot of
Yeah,
courage.
I've went back and forth about it for the last
I know,
year
but
about
you did
doing
it.
it, but
And I was, and I was hoping, I really wanted to talk to you last year, but I didn't want to press you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember me telling you, when you're ready, we'll be ready, and this is great. So, I think at this point, I think the message was delivered. People understand how serious this
it's
is.
just hard.
Right. And
I
I
mean,
want to,
most people just need to be looking for them simple signs. I
Right.
mean, nervousness, that kind of thing. Just ask person, hey, is there something I can help you with? I mean, are you in a situation you need to get out?
right.
But it's hard to do.
I want to ask
So-
you one final question
Okay.
before we wrap it up. If you have somebody listening right now this show, this interview, and you have someone in a situation and they've reconciled, but yet there's always that
Let's continue.
pattern, what would you tell them to do?
You need to get out. I mean, it's not healthy for you or the person who's doing it to you. It's not. I mean, they need to deal with what's going on, whether it's childhood for them or whatever, and you need to start, grab at any straw possible, any person who's taking any interest, because it's not easy. There's nothing easy about it, There is nothing easy. I'm not even going to try to play. It's taken me this long, and I still deal with it every day.
Yeah.
You just got to, you're going to have to dig deep in yourself and know you're worth it to get out. I mean, the only thing keeps me going is I'm just hoping my daughter never has to be in the situation
that.
like I was, because I was her age when it started with me.
Right.
And I tell her every day, don't ever, never let anybody ever put their hands on you or talk down to you in a relationship, period.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your friendship and the courage. And I want to thank everybody for watching this interview. And I just implore everybody to really think about this. So
Yeah.
now you understand, these types of challenges that somebody that's had to go through this and think about this. If you recognize anybody that may be in trouble, how you can lend a helping hand confidentially to help them get out of the
hard.
situation, whatever you can do. But again, thanks again for this episode of Conversations with Chris and Jeff for producing the show. And we'll see you in the next time.